right, so welcome back to the on-demand coaching here with Business Fast Track, and we're on stage 4. And I don't want to make this sound overly touchy-feely, but stage 4 is all about relationships and how do we build winning relationships. And so as I think about what makes people successful, we can think a lot about money, we can think about resources in terms of space, in terms of other capital. But the one thing that really gets overlooked in the success equation is relationship capital. And so if we aren't building a strong relationship foundation in our business, we're missing out on a key component to long-term business growth. And I think of one of the stories that comes to mind, if you've ever seen the movie The Social Network, which is about Mark Zuckerberg and how he created Facebook. One of the narratives in that movie is it makes it seem like Mark Zuckerberg is like this lone maverick who masterfully creates some code and some craft and builds Facebook out of thin air and overnight becomes a success. But one of the subtle narratives I think in that movie is that Mark didn't do it alone. Mark had influence from people like Sean Parker. He had influence from various venture capital firms. He had different people on his team that were supporting him along that journey. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know that not all those people were super appreciative about how Mark approached the business and how that came forward. But I think sometimes we lose sight of where success comes from when we see a movie like that and we think that it's all about one guy against all obstacles being the rugged individualist and making it work. But in reality, the most successful people that you hear talk about success always talk about utilizing a team. And if we're not utilizing relationships effectively in our team, at some point in time, your business is going to plateau. You're going to get to a point where your business doesn't grow any further. Now, why is that going to happen? The reason that happens is that there's only so much that you can do by yourself. You can only do so much in a day by yourself. At some point, you're going to have to rely on other people to help you move your business forward effectively. At some point as you're hearing this, you may be thinking, you know what, I get it. Relationships are important. We need a team to win. I've heard all that before. But I'm not so much trying to share some information with you about why relationships are important or what to do with relationships or to introduce a new concept. But what I want to do is get your focus on how can you be more intentional with your relationships. So for instance, I know it's important to spend time with my wife and kids, but sometimes if I'm not intentional about that, I won't take my wife out on date nights like I should. I won't spend time having meaningful conversations with my children like I want to. It's not because I don't know that relationships are important, but sometimes I let other things get in the way of me building relationships. And so as we talk about this, I want you thinking about what are the areas where I can be a more intentional relationship builder in my business. Okay, so as we're talking about building relationships, just know a few things. Building relationships is a little bit uncomfortable at times because if we're building relationships at a high level, it takes things like trust. We've got to trust other people and we've got to believe in them. It's about empowering other people, which empowering sometimes is messy and it takes time. It requires vulnerability on our part. Have you ever tried to connect with someone at a deep level and not be vulnerable? That's really hard for leaders. Now, as I talk about this, one of the things that I hear from leaders is, boy, I don't want to do that, or gosh, that just sounds too messy and I don't want to be friends with my employees. So we're going to talk about all those different things. So hopefully you're ready to get started because we're going to really dive into this. So let me tell you about the worst piece of management advice that I ever received. When I was a new manager at 24, I had a senior leader pull me aside and he said, Brandon, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't ever become friends with your employees. In fact, hold your employees at an arm's length. I mean, you want to hold them out away from you. You don't want them getting too close. You don't want them inside your business and knowing too much about you. You've got to stay aloof. And I followed that advice to my own detriment. In fact, I followed it so well that at some point in time, about a year and a half into that leadership assignment, I had had a conversation with an employee who let me know that in no uncertain terms that they did not like me. And after hearing that, what I realized is my model for leadership was broken. The way that I approached building relationships was all about what can I get from someone rather than what can I give to them. And so I decided to change that paradigm. And when I started investing in people at a high level, what I recognized is it required me to be more vulnerable, and I had to really change things about myself. But I realized how well my employees responded to that specific direction. So as we talk about this isn't stuff that I'm just telling you in theory that I read in a book. This is stuff that I've lived and developed for the past 15 plus years that I know for certain will work. How do I know it will work? Well, in that story when I told you the employee didn't like me, well, my whole team didn't really like me. And I took this team that I was sure was the reason for my lack of success. And I changed one thing about that team. I changed the leadership of that team, which was myself. And in doing so, we went from being a mediocre office to being a fantastic office, so much so that it afforded me an opportunity for advancement within that company. Just changing myself and the way that I related to people from a relationship standpoint. All right, so before I get into some of the tools that we are going to talk about and work on in stage 4 with the relationship optimizer, let me talk to you and address the situation with should you become friends with your employees? And this is something I hear a lot, and this is something that I struggled with as well. But let me give you a different analogy. Let's say that you have kids, which I know a lot of you watching this video do. I have kids. Now, what if I came to you and said, hey, look at your son or daughter, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to hold them at an arm's length. I want you to not become friends with them. I want you to learn as little about that person as you possibly can, and I just want you to make sure that you manage them so that they live up to your expectations. But who I'm talking about is your children. What kind of advice do you think that that is if I give that to you about your own kids? You probably wouldn't accept that. In fact, you'd tell me you're crazy to do that. Now, I'm not saying that your employees are children, but I am trying to say this. When we're talking about building and cultivating people, we would never say that about our children, but yet we say it about our employees all the time. And whether we like it or not, our employees are not our kids, but they are under our care, and we are responsible to them. So as part of that responsibility, doesn't it make sense that at some level I should know them and understand them? Doesn't it make sense that I should build some sort of a relationship with them? And also, doesn't it make sense that at some level I should make myself known to that person? Just like we would never shut our kids out that way, does it really make sense to shut out our employees in that same way? But yet that's something that I've done in the past, and that's something that I've seen lots of leaders do. Let me give you an example of what this looks like. I was sitting down with a friend of mine, and we were having coffee, and he was talking about something that he was frustrated at work. Now, being in the kind of work that I do, I'm always interested to hear what sort of things do employees hear from their bosses that are frustrating. Well, let me give you a really extreme example. So my friend was talking to me, and he said, hey, I had a conversation with my boss the other day, and in that conversation, it came up that I had adopted a child. And my boss really looked at me very surprised, and he said, oh, you adopted a kid? Well, congratulations. When did you do that? He said 5 years ago. Now imagine this. You've adopted a child, and your boss that you work with every single day and spend upwards of 40 hours a week with recognizes one of the most significant life events in your life 5 years later. How special, how important does that make you feel? In fact, how much are you willing to invest and build a relationship with that person as a result of that? It becomes very challenging, but this is the stuff that we do as leaders all the time. Now look, I'm not saying that you have to watch fried green tomatoes together and be the best of friends and cry it out and whatever. It doesn't have to be like that. But at some level, we've got to look at our employees as a real resource to invest in so that we can get the most out of that relationship and create real power. So let me jump into some of the tools that you're going to recognize and that I want you to be familiar with as we work together in this stage. The first thing is the Strengths Builder. The Strengths Builder is a tool that I got actually from a book from Marcus Buckingham called First Break All the Rules. And I loved this viewpoint on management because I've tried this viewpoint on management, and what I've recognized about it is that it works at a high level. And the Strengths Builder is a set of 10 questions, and the first one is, what keeps you here? Aren't you interested to know why someone does what they do for you? Are they inspired by the work, or do they want a paycheck? The second question is, what are their strengths? The third question is, what are their weaknesses? Now, the problem that leaders make is sometimes we assume what people's strengths and weaknesses are. But in assuming, we miss out on what could be below the surface that we're not seeing. Question number 4 is about getting their specific goals for their timeline. What I want to know is, does this person have any goals at all in regards to their current role and what they're trying to accomplish? Typically, they won't. Now, these questions go on and on. There's 10 questions. I'm not going to go through every single one of them because you have access to the tool through our coaching. But as you can see, these are a set of questions to allow me to really dig deeper and really know someone at a different level. And when I know people at a different level, I can use that to help them get to their next step. So let's talk about some other personal development tools that we're going to utilize as we build relationships. One of the things that I love to do is I like to check in with people on a one-on-one basis. So if you have employees that report directly to you, how often do you check in with them on a one-on-one basis? You don't have to do this every day or every week. But once a month, I like to sit down with my team, and I like to take them out for lunch, or I like to take them out for coffee, and I like to see how they're doing. How am I doing as your boss? How do you like the work environment that you're working in? How do you like your team? Is there anything that you're concerned about? Is there anything that you love doing that you want to tell me about? Discuss the wins and losses with regards to your world of work. I want to check in with people on a one-on-one basis. I'm amazed at how little business owners really want to take the time to do this. But the more I keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening and where my team's at, the more I can manage them effectively. Let's talk about employee reviews. A lot of people don't do employee reviews, or they think they're a waste of time, or they're very sporadic with it. But there's a number of different reasons that I want to review someone's performance. The first thing is I like people to know where they stand. And if we're not checking in with people and giving them a formal review process, we're robbing them of the ability to really see where they stand and get an insight as to how I feel about that person and their job performance. So I like to do a formal job review on at least a yearly basis, and I also like to tie that into the potential for a raise. Now that doesn't mean they're going to get a raise, but it's a potential for a raise, and I want people to know that's how raises happen. It's not very often that I hear a business owner come to me and say, Brandon, I had my employee just walk up to me out of the blue and they asked me for a raise. Can you believe the nerve of this woman to come up to me and ask me for a raise out of the blue? And I'm like, well, cool. When was the last time you gave them a raise? 4 years ago. Okay, awesome. So they got a raise 4 years ago and now you're mad because 4 years later they finally had the courage to actually ask you for a raise and have that conversation, which I'm sure was terrifying for the employee, but it's just funny how we lose perspective that way. So I talked to the business owner, I said, listen, do you want to create a situation where people don't ask you for random raises? Yes, I would. Okay, great. Create space for that conversation to happen on a routine basis, on a rhythms basis. So if you watch the Stage 3 video on planning and production, you know I talked about rhythms in that video. One of the things to have on a rhythm is employee reviews, so we can check in and see how we're doing. But one of the other negative narratives that comes up with employee reviews is that employees don't like them. But the reason why employees don't like them is the way that we handle employee reviews. Typically, how we handle them is we don't give them any feedback throughout the year. Then we use the employee review as a time to unroll the laundry list of disappointments that we have with this person during that time. And then we wonder why the employee's not excited about all the negative feedback that we've saved up throughout the year that we're now bestowing on them in this awesome annual review process. Of course, if that's the case, I'm not going to be excited about that because I know I'm walking into an ambush. And I don't want it to be that way. I believe in giving regular feedback that's timely and using the review process as an opportunity to really connect and really build for the future and get them excited about their career and what the next steps of their career are. That means we're going to talk about where I think they're at, that they do really well. It also means we're going to talk about where they're at, where they're not doing so well, where I think that there's some opportunity for development. Now, as part of this process, I like to use a tool called the Manager's Letter. And the manager's letter is an opportunity for me to see how connected that employee is at that given time with the overall objectives of the company. So I like to use that in conjunction with my review to really get a feel for where their head's at, and are they seeing the big picture in the same way that I am? Because that may tell me as a leader if I need to do a better job of communicating that big picture going forward. One of the other tools that I like to use is a personal development plan. What is a personal development plan? This is a set of development needs that an employee might have that I recognize or the employee recognizes that I'm going to put together in a formal document. Now, if you'll notice on the coaching portal, we have several tools, and one of those is a personal development plan outline. Why does this exist? I want my team to be growing, and I want to invest in that team. Even if it's stuff that is not specific to the work that we're doing right now. For instance, I may train someone on time management. I may train them on how to speak and present better. Now, they may or may not use those things in my business at a high level, but I want them to have those skills. One of the things that I hear from business owners that they're scared to do is invest in people in training and education and development. But I always hearken back to a kind of a fictional conversation that I've heard between a CEO and a CFO, where the CEO says, hey, we really need to invest in these people at a high level. And the CFO says, well, gosh, what if we invest in these people and they leave? And the CEO says, well, what if we don't and they stay? And that's the conundrum that a lot of business owners are under. They're like, what if I teach these people and I train them and I grow them and I develop them and they go somewhere else? Well, the nerve of these people to want to leave and maybe look for a better opportunity, but at the same time, why would we want them to stick around and not develop them and not make them better versions of themselves? I'm going to talk in stage 5 about marketing and the delivered experience, and we're going to see why we want to train our team to make them better in order to do that. So we want to have some kind of a development plan in place so that people feel like they're growing on an ongoing basis. And I promise you, more so than money, if you can help them grow and master what they do and master their own life, they will be eternally grateful for the opportunity, and they will carry that not only in your world of work, but they'll carry that for the rest of their lives, and you've made them better people as a result of doing that. So as we're talking about personal development plans, the other thing that comes to mind is training. Think about what kind of training you do right now. Most of the business owners that I work with do some kind of a team training environment. The problem with team training is it can be valuable at some level, but it doesn't address individual needs. So I want to make sure that we're doing team training on a select basis, but I want to do one-on-one individual training as much as I possibly can. And again, I want to put this on a rhythm. Maybe I've got one-on-one training on a monthly rhythm where I'm doing a one-on-one training, and maybe I take them out for lunch or coffee after we do the training. But I want to ensure that I'm growing and developing training my team at a high level. All right, so beyond training, the other thing that I think is very powerful in building a relationship with people is defining roles. A lot of times employees walk into a business or they walk into their world of work and they don't really understand what their priorities are, and they don't really understand what's expected of them. And a lot of times that's a leadership blind spot on our part because we think that it's obvious what their most important activities are or their roles are. So as leaders, we can do a better job defining roles for people, and specifically defining the way that an employee wins at their job. So an employee should be able to look at their world of work and see what's going on and say, am I winning or am I not? That way, when we get to something like an employee review, they already know, hey, I'm on track and I'm winning, or hey, I'm behind the pace and I need to do a better job. There's no mystery in that conversation because I've gotten very clear about what their roles are. People do not thrive in ambiguity. In fact, for most people, ambiguity is an absolute nightmare and is something to be avoided at all costs. Now, as a business owner, it's easier for us to thrive in ambiguity because as a business, there's just a lot of ambiguity that comes with running a business. I don't always know what's going to happen tomorrow or 1 year from now, and I'm okay with that. That's part of the excitement of running a business. But for an employee, ambiguity is just an absolute disaster, and it's something to be avoided because if there's too much ambiguity, they become disengaged. And if they're not engaged in the work that they're doing, they're not performing at a high level, they're not serving our clients or customers at the highest level, and they're not performing to the level that they're capable of. So it's our job as leaders to really find ways that we can push people to that next level because let's face it, As leaders, we're also coaches, and sometimes our job as a coach is to believe in people when they don't believe in themselves. And I guarantee you, every person that works for you has some kind of a blind spot or an issue where they lack confidence and they're not confident in what they do. So we want to look for those things and find ways to build their confidence and build them up. Defining roles and creating certainty is a great way to build confidence and build people up. So the last thing I want to talk about is building culture, and specifically fun. So what is the culture that you're looking for in your office? Do you want a more laid-back atmosphere? Do you want something that's more buttoned up and professional? Neither one of those is wrong. We just have to make a commitment and define that and then stick to it. And it's really easy to one day want things buttoned up and then the next day to be real loose and fun. The problem with that is that's very frustrating for an employee because they don't know from one day to the next whether it's fun day or button-up day. So what is the culture that you want to create? And again, the more you invest in people, the more you're going to create a powerful culture. And when I throw fun in there, what I've recognized is it's easy to forget to celebrate the success and create some fun. And I know a lot of business owners that are just really hard drivers, and I think that's awesome. You're a hard driver, and that really is the whole secret to your success. But at the same time, we can drive so hard that we never step back and appreciate the good things that are happening. So as a business owner, how can you create fun? When was the last time you took your team out for a beer? When was the last time you took them out for bowling? Or when was the last time you had them over to the house for a barbecue? That's right, I said have them over to your house for a barbecue. Why are these things important? I can create a lot of fun and a lot of respect and mutual and a really healthy culture by letting people see the human side to me as a leader. And I think a lot of times we try to put on this air of we're a robot and we don't have fears and we don't have hopes and dreams. We just come in and we get the job done. But we rob people of the opportunity to see us in a vulnerable position or see us as a human being. And if you think that your team sees you as a human being, I promise you, for a lot of you that I work with who have professional degrees, that have very successful businesses, your team sees you as anything but human. In fact, you're like a superhuman person, maybe even a robot to them that doesn't have the same issues and concerns that they do. So I want to let my hair down a little bit. I want to take them out, celebrate them, and really create some fun. And I talked about the quarterly retreats in stage 3, and that's why quarterly retreats are so powerful. We want to get people together on a quarterly basis. We want to celebrate the wins, if there's a win to celebrate, and we want to get people together for some fun. And I've had some people email me and text me pictures of them picking up their team in a limo to do their quarterly retreat, going out and having a nice dinner after a quarterly retreat. I mean, I've just seen all kinds of fun things that business owners have been doing to really connect with their team and create a culture of fun. Why do we want to do that? Let's face it, the average person spends the majority of their time during the week at work. Whether we like to talk about that or not, we spend most of our waking time at work. So why not make it fun? Why not make it an environment where people can thrive and really enjoy versus making it something that just seems like drudgery and just kind of a have to versus a get to? How would that change your business if you did all those things? So think about how you can invest in people. Think about some of those tools that I talked about and think about what's missing in your own leadership journey. The good news is you probably are doing a lot of these things. And if you are, that's great. What's the next level? How can you take that to the next step so that you can continue to build long-term winning relationships in your business? And the more you can do that, the more you're going to have an empowered team, an engaged team, and the more your business is going to grow long-term.